Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kanisha if you already don't know. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the 10 books that I want to read this fall. Fall is like the perfect time to start reading cozy, mystery, fantasy, classic books. So I thought it's finally time to get into those types of books, and I have 10 right here that I'm going to talk about. So let's get into the video. So the first one is part of a series, well, technically a duology. It is Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the second book to Divine Rivals, and I read Divine Rivals earlier this year, I think in January. It was one of the first few books that I read this year, and I really liked it. And obviously Ruthless Vows came out, I don't know when it came out, but it came out sometime this year. And I literally got it the day release, and I have yet to read this, so I'm kind of determined to read it. I really want to know what happens, because the way the first book ended was kind of a cliffhanger, so I kind of want to see what happens in the second one. And I can't wait to read more about Iris and Iris and Roman. And this one kind of has like a magical element to it, because the typewriters have some type of magic in it, and it's kind of a historical fantasy too as well. So it's a really good book that you guys probably should read. Next is a book that I think a lot of people know, but also know the movies. It is The Hobbit. I've had this copy since forever, and I bought this at the thrift store, so it's a little beaten up. I have watched most of the Lord of the Rings series, The Hobbit, like all of that. I have watched most of them because my dad was such a big fan of those movies, so I have watched them as well. I could be totally wrong about this, but I think the book came out first before those. I could be wrong. Don't get mad at me if I got it wrong, but I really just want to get more into like the very famous and classical books that obviously kind of define a lot of the newer books today. So I feel like The Hobbit is one of those books, so I'm excited to read this. I might make like a reading vlog for this, who knows. Next is another classic book, if you would say, more to kind of like the younger audience, and it is Twilight by Stephanie Meyers. I tried to read this last year. Like, I have a little bit of annotations there. I tried to read it, didn't really get into it, but I really want to read the Twilight series. I want to read all of the books. I love the movies, specifically the first one. I love the first one, so I really want to get into this book. I feel like it's not gonna be, obviously it's not gonna be super hard, because this is technically a YA book, and I feel like since I know most of the plot in Twilight and the rest of the series, it'll be comfortable to read. So it won't be like the worst thing in the world, and I'm not gonna go into it like with nothing. I mean, like vampires, romance, werewolves. What more do you need? What more do you need? It's all in this book. It's all in this book. So I'm excited. Next is a newer book that came out maybe last year, I'm pretty sure. It is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I think I'm pronouncing that last name wrong. I'm so sorry. But basically, our main character, our female main character, she becomes assistant to the villain, and that's kind of like the story. I'm pretty sure this is more like a comedy mystery thriller type of book, because from what I've seen, it's like kind of like funny a little bit. There's a little bit of banter, all of that. And I feel like I love the concept. Like, you kind of see the assistant to the villain. I feel like you don't really see that in a lot of books or movies. They're usually just like the side character. So the fact that this is a main character moment, I really love that. And I know the second book came out recently, so I need to go read that soon. But obviously I will be reading this first before reading the second one. Next is Vicious by V. Schwab. I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I absolutely love that book so much. So I'm so excited to get more into V. Schwab's books. And I feel like Vicious is gonna be a good one. To be honest with you, I have no idea what it's really about. I just know the two main characters, Victor and Eli. I'm pretty sure it's kind of like a dark academia book. It starts in college, and they're kind of like very smart students, very brilliant, very type of students, and when they meet together they kind of form a connection, but everything slowly starts to become reality. Like everything that was on paper starts to become reality. I think that's the type of story that's happening. I think I could be totally wrong, but who knows. I'm just so excited to read this because I've had this book for maybe 2 years now, so I think it's finally time to read it. Next we have is If We Were Villains by ML Rio. I have been debating on whether I was gonna read this book because I have been holding back on this book because The Secret History is one of my favorite books ever, and I've heard that this book is basically a copy of it. I wish I never heard that because I hate that. I hate how I've heard that it's now a copy of The Secret History because it makes me not want to read this book anymore. But I am determined because I love The Secret History. So I feel like I might love this book either way. I mean, it is a dark academia book too. This follows more of like students who are into Shakespeare, so that's something I'm not really familiar with, like Shakespeare's work. So this might be a little bit confusing for me, but we'll see what happens, and I can't wait to read it. So the next book, it is part of a series. It is the second book, and it is The Gilded Cage by Lynette Noni. This is the second book in the Prison Healer series. I think that's what it's just called, the Prison Healer series. I could be totally wrong. There might be like an actual name for the series, but the first book is The Prison Healer. Obviously, it is a continuation of the first book. Basically, the first book, our main character, Kiva, she is this prison healer, and one day the queen comes in and she has to like protect the queen, but the queen also has to face these trials, so Kiva decides to go into her spot and save the queen. So now Kiva has to go through all these obstacles and all these trials and everything to save the queen. That's kind of like the first gist of the book. Such a good YA fantasy book. I feel like a lot of people don't talk about The Prison Healer, so if you haven't read that one yet, you need to right now. It was so good. The ending ended off with a cliffhanger too as well, and there was a little bit of romance. I mean, I feel like every book has romance now, but I mean, it was like sprinkles of it. It wasn't like so much of the whole plot, so that was really good. Next we have is The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake, and obviously this book is very popular. It's been like popular since the start of Booktok, and I have not read it. I honestly have been holding back. I have not read any of her work before, and I have most of her books, which is really funny. I really need to get into it. I heard this is really good, The Atlas 6. I think there's more books in this series. I don't think it's just a single book, but I think there's like magic and there's like 6 characters in this story. I feel like Olivia Blake, I feel like a lot of people love her books, so I can't wait to get into this, and I'm interested to see what actually happens because I actually have no idea what really happens in this book. I just heard it from everyone that has been talking about this book. So okay, the next 2 are classic books, like very classic books that I really want to read because I love the movie adaptation of these 2 books. So especially since I just rewatched those 2 maybe a couple weeks ago, so I'm kind of in that mood right now to read these books, and I feel like it's time. It's finally time. The first book, it is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Obviously this book is a very popular book because Jane Austen is an amazing writer, but also a good storyteller, but also she started a lot of tropes that we know now. Specifically, Pride and Prejudice kind of has like the enemies to lovers trope that's with Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. I really do love the 2005 Pride and Prejudice movie. Really love the way it was like directed and the setting of it. Just everything was perfect about that. So I'm excited to read this book, but I've heard that it's a little bit more complicated. I have read a tiny bit of it and I kind of understand it, especially if you watch the movie before you read it. You kind of get a better understanding of it. Excited but nervous. Like nervous I'm not gonna understand some parts and I'm gonna be confused, but also excited because I really just love the story that's in this book. I really love Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth as characters, like individually but also together. And the last book that I want to read this fall, it is Little Women This book obviously is so popular, so popular. There's so many movie adaptations of this. I've watched the one with Winona Ryder. That's like the 1990, I don't know what year, but it's like the 90s version of it. Then I also watched the 2019 version with Greta Gerwig directed it, and I love the 2019 one. I love that one. I think that one is the best adaptation in my opinion. The way it was just directed, and I love how the flashback scenes were warm tone, while the present scenes were more of a cool tone. And I also love obviously the speech that Amy gives and the speech that Joe gives, and also the hill scene where, you know, Laurie and Joe are there. There's just so many iconic scenes in the Greta Gerwig version, which I love. So I'm excited to read this book. I feel like I will get to know more about the sisters individually, because obviously a movie could show as many parts as they can, but sometimes it doesn't show everything that the sisters could be. So I feel like I want to know more about Meg and Beth, because I feel like the main focus is always Joe and Amy. So I really want to know more about Beth and Meg, because I feel like those are the sisters that are kind of just pushed to the back and no one cares about them. I feel like this is such a cozy book to read in the fall, because it's just perfect. It's really just perfect. So those are the books I want to read this fall. Hopefully I get to them, or we'll see. I will probably make some reading vlogs for most of these books, because why not? But let me know if you've read any of these books or what books you're planning on reading this fall. And I hope you guys have an amazing week, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.